I may need to explain what that analogy refers to. The idea of playing chess with a pigeon. It comes from a scientist called Scott D. Weizenhofer, comparing the debate with creationists between creationists and reality, evolution, to playing chess with a pigeon. Do not phone me about that. All right, not interested. Okay. The pigeon knocks over all the pieces, poops on the board, and then flies away claiming that it's won. So that is, in many ways, the challenge that faces Keir Starmer in Washington, D.C. today. He will be playing chess with a pigeon. And I mean, by that, just by way of loose illustration, you can point to the fact that he's made various claims, Trump, I mean, about minerals, about Ukraine. He says something about someone else. That someone else denies that thing is going to happen, so he says something else about someone else. There's a real problem for journalism with Trump. There always has been, but it's a much bigger problem than it was before. I mean, it's best understood historically or previously as the tension between facts and what they chose to call alternative facts, as in the tension between the truth and blatant lies that they want people to believe. And you need media to be complicit in that. You can't sustain a regime built on lies unless you have some pretty powerful engines of media propelling and promoting those lies. And of course, that also involves silencing challenge to the lies, which is what Simon Mark was talking to us about yesterday, about changes to the White House roster and the organizations that will have proper access to the president. I think you can press fast forward on that. It will be toe ticklers exclusively sooner rather than later. But the other element of the challenge, which I think is not fully understood, because it is a bit like being asked to suddenly accept, for example, that the sun does not revolve around the earth. It's something that society can't process, even though it has become self-evident. We have believed something untrue for so long that we cannot adjust to the new reality, or we have become so used to something, whether it's true or not, that adjusting to the new reality is really, really difficult. So you can't, and it would be logistically and commercially impossible for a newspaper, for example, today, not to fill several pages with analysis of Starmer's visit to Washington, D.C. What they can't do is leave 5 pages blank and just say there's no point bringing the traditional tools of analysis to this moment. That there is no point bringing our magnifying glasses and our scalpels to an event that may turn out to be a turkey shoot or a rodeo. You just don't have that fitness for purpose. It's not even a criticism of the media. They just don't know what to do when they are essentially reporting upon a meeting where half of the participants will be having a chimpanzee's tea party, like those old PG Tips adverts, and the other half of the negotiation, the other half of the meeting, will be traditional politicians. It's impossible. It's a bit like an ice hockey team turning up to play football. You just don't know how to analyze it. You don't know how to break it down. And that is, I think, just something worth pointing out rather than something that is a particular axe to grind. We don't know what to do. I use we very loosely, but we don't know what to do. We can't say, God knows, even if they come out and do a press conference, by the same time the next day, it may turn out that everything Donald Trump has said in the press conference is completely untrue. There are a couple of sort of smaller questions in front of us today. For example, the idea of what Starmer would do if Trump were to engage in a lie as egregious as the one he tried when Emmanuel Macron was sitting next to him. I don't know how much of the Emmanuel Macron meeting you've watched. It's absolutely fascinating. It's fascinating in so many ways. But what Macron manages to do, and I think he's a more naturally charming man than Starmer. And remember, being charming is not necessarily a good thing. By that, I mean emollient. I mean, he's good at smoothing other people. Well, he appears to be very good at smoothing Trump's feathers. There's a lot of physical contact. You could almost find a sort of quasi-homoerotic subtext to the way that Macron is treating Trump. He's flirting with him almost. He's softening him up. He's buttering him up. But he's also refusing to let that big lie pass, the big lie about European support for Ukraine being something that is going to be paid back by Ukraine at some point. A blatant lie that I guess Trump has to inflate in order to justify his own weaselly and cowardly potential abandonment of Ukraine. But remember, as I said a moment ago, even after calling Volodymyr Zelensky a dictator, the abandonment of Ukraine is still only potential. It's as if once everything is possible, the truth dies. He can say on a Monday, we will not put troops in Ukraine, and we are taking all their minerals, and that will be good for them. And then he can say on Tuesday, we've got all their minerals, it's such a great win, and our troops will be there to keep the peace. I don't know what you call it. I think Mehdi Hassan calls it gilly-gashing or something like that in the context of interviews, where you just throw so much into the mix and move so quickly from one point to another that you never really get pinned down on any of the nonsense that you're spouting. And therefore, the interlocutor, the person you're interviewing, somehow wins, somehow prevails. So you've got the little stuff. Will Starmer cope with the blatant public lies? Will Starmer be able to massage Donald Trump's ego sufficiently? I think we can be fairly confident we're not going to have a Theresa May moment when they start holding hands, although I think Emmanuel Macron came about as close to that sort of imagery that as a male politician could do. So for me, Gish Gallop it's called. Thank you, Robert. So it's a little bit like, and thank you to Dan for saying don't bring the Weasleys into this. So you've got the small questions of personal interaction, if you like. And then you've got the big questions, of which there is only one, really, in the context of diplomatic relations. I know that even if Keir Starmer were to secure what would be an objective diplomatic triumph, you would be unlikely to see it reported as such in 80 or 90% of the UK media. That is just the scenario that we currently live with. And to be honest, some of the recent developments in the US media paint a pretty grim picture of the direction of traffic when you get an essentially far-right administration in charge of a country. More on that later. You've got the big question of what would success look like for Keir Starmer and, of course, by association, Ukraine. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need, 11 minutes after 10. And, you know, you can bring big things or little things to the party this morning. What would be success? Because it might just be success for Keir Starmer would be coming out unscathed, coming out unhumiliated, coming out unembarrassed. Would that be success? This is what I mean about playing chess with a pigeon. There's no rules. Well, one person will be playing by a set of established rules. The other participant will not. The other participant is perfectly capable of knocking over all the pieces, pooping on the board. Apologies for the Americanism, but it's probably a little bit more palatable than any other verb I could use. And then flying off claiming glorious victory. And of course, the point about Trump and his relationship with propaganda is that you'll have millions of people jumping up and down cheering him without quite knowing what it is that they are supposed to be celebrating. Anyone else just think of Brexit then, when I said that? Jumping up and down celebrating without having the first idea about what it is that they think they're supposed to have won. But anyway, what does success look like? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 12 minutes after 10 is the time. 0345 6060 973 is the number. I mean, for me, I don't think that anything short of a commitment to support the European peacekeeping force in Ukraine is acceptable. I think the simple line that if there are not, I mean, wherever the lines are drawn, territorially speaking, if there is not meaningful support from the United States for what will be a largely European peacekeeping force on Ukraine's side of that line, then Vladimir Putin will invade again. I don't even think that that's a controversial statement. I mean, he might, in the introduction of a meaningful peacekeeping force, he might just go and invade somewhere else. That's another element of the big picture questions, is how the peace, if it is achieved, the ceasefire, the cessation of hostilities, how it leaves Putin with regard to his license to deploy similar tactics on different territories. We know that the Baltic states are worried. We know that countries like Lithuania, Estonia, even Poland live in a state of existential peril that's impossible for many people in the UK to understand, because we don't have a generational memory of occupation, whether by Nazis or by Russians. We just don't have it. So I can't see how. It won't necessarily be something that is decided tomorrow, but it will be something that we will get an idea of the plausibility of, whether or not Donald Trump is going to make a statement about future deployment of US troops and the continuance of US support for Ukraine. If he comes back with anything less than that, I don't know that the trip will have been worth it. But listen, hey, I'm just one bloke with a big mouth. I could be completely wrong. You may have already thought things through in considerably more depth than I have. And if you have, 03456060973 is the number that you need. The headlines are fairly united. Starmer to confront Trump, Starmer to press Trump. And it is on that single issue, the fact that this has been made known, the fact that this is how the media has been briefed, again, playing by the old rules which don't apply to Trump, but journalism doesn't know what else to do. The pressure, the pressing is in the specific area of continued US security guarantees in Ukraine, which is very much at odds with what Trump has said previously. Which brings us back to the point about the pigeon. With other politicians, with other presidents, what had been said previously would be, at the very least, a strong guide as to what would happen, and at the most, a cast iron guarantee. If they had said in campaign mode, if they had pledged in speeches to do X, then by the time the moment to make the final decision came around, they would have little choice but to do X. But that doesn't happen with Trump. Just because Trump said on Monday that he's going to do something doesn't mean that he will still be held to it on Tuesday, and by Wednesday he'll be claiming he never said it in the first place. You can see examples of it here. It's like Farage. We played that clip the other day claiming that he'd never praised Putin. And then without even pausing for breath, moving on to say, oh, wait, well, I didn't praise this bit of him, I praised that. But it's just the relationship with truth is so completely non-existent. They don't even notice that they're doing it. So how do you negotiate with someone like that? What does success look like? What would success be as Keir Starmer travels, as Nick put it rather winningly, to a dicey meeting in DC?